There's a lot of opinions that one is seemingly supposed to have if they listen to these albums from Radiohead. I don't consider myself a diehard fan. I don't think there are any diehard fans who've been listening to music for like, 10, 15, 20 years, then got into Radiohead and were like, oh yeah, no, this is the greatest thing ever. I think it's just people, that was their first band they got into and they have to, because they insist that they're right, because, if you're a major Radiohead fan, you think you're better than the average person, I imagine. And so, you had to always be right. And so, oh no, Radiohead have to be better than everything because, otherwise I wouldn't have found them first, blah, 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 blah. Whatever. You don't want to, like, depreciate those moments in your mind by saying, yeah, maybe Radiohead aren't as good as some other bands. You don't want to have that moment. And if you do, you might come to the conclusion that maybe they aren't the special and maybe the best thing they ever put out was actually The King of Limbs in 2011. Morning Mr Magpie, their finest composition yet. Though I love Burn the Witch from the 2016 album. I like that they haven't put out a new album just because, they're not like going, hey guys, we're still... I like that they feel as though, it's like, I almost like the idea that they feel as though they have nothing else to say. Like, I appreciate the humility of that. God knows they could use some. Well, it's not even them. Well, them. York, it might be true. I think you can't hold notes that long and, like does he really think he's that good? Like, he must think, like, a lot's being conveyed when he's singing. Maybe for some people it is. Like, I've heard people talk about, oh, he's got such a beautiful voice, and it's like, sure, I guess. To be fair, I don't know if there's any singer I really feel that way about. Maybe some female singers, just because, like, I guess it's easier to kind of sympathize, like, oh, poor thing, like, from a male perspective myself. Like, hear another guy doing this stuff, I'm just like, grow up, loser. Seriously, it's terrible. I'm very, very, very cruel to other men, apparently. No, really, to me it always just seemed obvious that the most interesting compositions from Radiohead were on this album. And the reason I think that is because you can pin OK Computer as part of a scene. Oh, it's that, like, wannabe deep, sort of intimate alt-rock. You listen to the lyrics and they're really profound, and it's more than the note density of 70s prog rock or the hook-laden catchiness or experimentalism of 80s synth pop or EBM or whatever you want to name, early industrial acts. Is a Radiohead's like, oh no, actually it's going back to the source. We think we're as, like, lyrically profound as, like, Neil Young or something. I'm not even the biggest Neil Young fan in the world. I know people feel that way about Neil Young, and it was the 90s. He was going through something of a revival at that time, But I don't know. I just feel as though it's like the idea of OK Computer being the peak of music. It's like, oh, it must have been really, like, lyrically profound, I guess. And it's just like, if it was, you just release it as, like, a book of poems, and it would speak for itself, I feel. Then Kid A, it's like, and here's the thing, OK Computer, it's like, it's no spiritualized, ladies and gentlemen, we are floating in space. Kid A was no Richard David James's output over the previous 10 years. Amnesiac, I could say the same thing about the same sessions. Hail to the Thief, it's just like, look, I prefer their electronic direction on that, In Rainbows. In Rainbows, they outright admitted that, like, the material sucked until Nigel Godrich kicked them up the arse. So maybe Godrich is the most intelligent and genius Radiohead associate, even though he's not a member of the group. Though Johnny Greenwood did casually prove himself as one of the great film composers alive, or even of all time, due to his work on There Will Be Blood, and especially The Phantom Thread. That was a phenomenal score for that. So what are we ultimately saying here? I'm saying that if Radiohead fans were unable to embrace The King of Limbs, then I'm really quite confused by what their priorities are. I feel as though perhaps they weren't giving King of Limbs the same open-minded leeway they gave Radiohead when they first got into it. Remember, at one time, Radiohead wasn't, like, the greatest thing ever for you. It was just some music that you heard and you were really, really captivated by. So with King of Limbs, you go into it going, alright, I need to have the best experience of my life. And it's just like, if you go into it with that attitude, will you? Somehow I just don't really think you could. So me, a more lackadaisical fan of Radiohead, listening to King of Limbs with little no expectations, as I do with all of their music, you want to be taken by surprise, that's kind of a great thrill of listening to some music that you enjoy, is that kind of, like, lack of expectation you had for it. And so I find King of Limbs to be the most re-listenable of Radiohead's albums, far and away. Let me know how hubris this take is, if you're so inclined. Thanks again, my friends. Appreciate it immensely.